Morning, everybody. How we doing today? I've been working out again, trying to get back into shape, dropping some weight. Sometimes you got to do that. Getting old and being overweight's not a smart combination. So I've been trying to get back in shape somewhat. It's not easy. My prediction that Tone Poet episode would get the views. It's probably 2 or 3 times more views on that now than my average video gets in a week, and it's only been up for 2 days. So it just kind of illustrates my point that the viewership, the algorithms, whatever it is, it's just the interest in classic jazz and understanding the era and the crossovers and all the different layers is infinitesimally small compared to the want to have the latest, coolest release so you can show off to your friends and be part of the crowd. And I just think it's disappointing a little bit. You know, there's so much jazz out there, so much more than the modern reissue programs will ever touch. They'll only always scrape 5-10% of the surface of the most sellable artists, the most marketable artists, and so much of it just gets left by the wayside. And it's telling a very incomplete story. I just gotta say that. There's this so many chapters of this music, so many levels to understand, the geography of it, the history of it, the developments in the music, the racial components of all of it. It's all so interwoven. And having a few outtakes and live records and a few best albums by a few of the big artists, it just gives you very little substance. It gives you very little meat to sink your teeth into. And like I said, it's great that Home Poet stuff exists. Absolutely. I have like 20, 24 of them or something like that. So I'm thankful for those guys, man. Great job. But I sure wish that the same exuberance and excitement existed for old Bethlehem 10 inches and Savoy stuff. And I'll show you a couple cool 10 inches I just got, actually. Hold on. So I just got these in the mail the other day, and I wasn't really trying to spend money because I don't have a lot of money right now. It's been slow this summer. But these were such good deals that I couldn't pass them up. And I have the music on this already on LP, but a 10-inch version of some of Billie Holiday's Decca stuff, Lover Man. There's some classics on here. There Is No Greater Love, Crazy He Calls Me, That Old Devil Called Love, Solitude. And again, this guy graded very conservatively. These records are really quite beautiful. The second piece I got from him, speaking of Savoy, was Lester Young tenor sax solos on 10-inch. It's 9004 or something. It's an early Savoy 10-inch. This stuff, of course, will exist on the 12-inch LP stuff. And I'm almost certain it came from 78 RPM stuff. In the Verve canon, they would call those collates, a collection of 78 stuff. But cool cover, rare Savoy 10-inch. Again, the price was very reasonable on that. Another piece I've always wanted, and I have this in several different formats on LP, but again, the 10-inch version of Volume 1, Jazz at Massey Hall. And that's a beautiful record by a fairly anonymous band. You may have heard a couple of these guys. Let's see here. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach, Charlie Mingus, and Bud Powell. Nobody special. I mean, Massey Hall is actually a hall in Toronto, Canada, where I'm from. It just undergone a major renovation, actually, and they built a Massey Hall condo tower that's like 60 stories tall, right adjacent to it. Toronto's under a crazy redevelopment phase, a lot of urbanization, a lot of density, like Subway, and it's nuts how much in density Toronto's building right now. But again, very cool piece. Something I've always wanted on the debut label. Beautiful condition. And again, I got these for a really reasonable price. Yeah, I paid a little bit more for these two. And again, they're Clef Norgrand stuff. And this came out as an LP with a yellow cover with some additional tracks on it. Billy has 4 10-inches at Clef. And I now have 3 of them. I have the music from all of them, of course, on LP, but great DSM cover. And I'm going to work on a cool presentation on graphic design and jazz, where we talk DSM and we talk some of the other things happening and who was influencing who and how interesting some of that rapid change is in jazz and how it affects the entire recording industry. And then lastly, I got this Lester Young Norgrand, actually, with Oscar Peterson. This is volume 1. And Norgrand number 5. Excuse me, I've had part 2 for a while. But part 1 kind of eluded me, and the only ones out there were hundreds of dollars. And there was one out there without a cover they wanted $100 for, maybe $75. There were some really beat up ones going for $300. This one's in quite beautiful condition by the looks of it. And I got paid $40 for it. So sometimes patience is a virtue. Classic David Stone Martin cover of the great Lester Young with Oscar Peterson. I think Barney Kessel was still with them at this time, if I remember, along with Ray Brown. I'm not positive. That chair changed several times. But wonderful thing, and I was looking for it for a long time. Happy to get that stuff. Today I'm going to show you a 6-pack of records I played in the cafe yesterday. Yesterday's 6-pack. And we want to talk about some things I listened to yesterday and how I enjoyed them and what impact they made on me. A record I played many times and love it dearly by the great Belgian guitarist René Thomas. Fantastic player, very dexterous, very nimble, kind of a light, delicate, effervescent sound. He kind of bumbles around like a floating insect. Just a real interesting approach, and he's got some fantastic players on here. Albert Tootie Heath on the drums of the Heath Brothers, Teddy Kotick on the bass, Hot O'Brien's on the piano, except on one track, and then René Thomas along with J.R. Monteros, who J.R. Monteros has a record on Blue Note as a leader, and then he didn't really like to record, didn't like to be in the spotlight, but he continued to play jazz for years. He did a few other recordings, but Monteros has a very small body of work. So anytime you find Montrose on something else, you want to track that down and keep note of it. But I guess recorded in 1960. This is a Riverside Jazzland subsidiary release. It's actually an imported pressing. But great record. If you stumble on that record, I mean, I've talked about it many times. It's fantastic. Then on the Transition label out of Boston is the fantastic Donald Byrd, Bird's Eye View. And it's pretty much a Blue Note hard bop session. Art Blakey, Horace Silver, Hank Mobley, Doug Watkins, along with the great Joe Gordon on trumpet, who is not typically part of this cast. But he's a fiery player. He's more of a West Coast scene participant, but he certainly fits in here just effortlessly. You'll hear some great Joe Gordon at the Nighthawk with Shelly Manne. Those 4 records, 1, 2, 3, 4, fantastic stuff. Joe Gordon really shines on those records, and really those are records that any collector should have. Shelly Manne records. But this Bird's Eye View is good, hard driving, hard bop out of the Boston area. Again, Transition, small label, only did maybe 10 releases, 12 releases before they went out of business. I'm a big fan of what's on Transition. There's 3 Donald Byrd records, and these are transitional, pardon the pun, between his era at Savoy, 55, 56, 56, 57, he's here. He starts doing side work at Blue Note, coupling up with Mobley and Morgan and some of those characters. He's obviously worked with the Jazz Messengers already in 55, 56. He's worked with Horace Silver for a while. And so now he's at Transition doing these recordings, and eventually he gets re-signed to Blue Note as a leader, and he makes a long string of albums at Blue Note. But his 3 Transition LPs, which I think only 2 of them came out at the time, are noteworthy, and they're an interesting part of a young man from Detroit's development and how he's starting to embrace the rhythm and the feel of hard bop and the melodic structures and still play with a great intensity. And original copies of that go for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. It's a Japanese pressing. Eddie Lockjaw Davis with the Paul Whedon Trio. Only have eyes for you. Great cover, by the way. Absolutely love it. Great rhythm and blues, barbecue jazz. This is something you can really sink your teeth into. It smells like honey. I mean, it's just syrupy. It's actually a stereo pressing for those who care about that kind of stuff. Obviously, I don't really care about stereo or mono. I prefer monos because I know they're originals and older. But if it's a stereo and that's all I can afford, I'll happily get the stereo. And trust me when I say it, no one in the room is going to be like, oh, that's a stereo or that's a mono. It's really much only the listener who puts the record on has any cognizance of that. I think it's a really overstated part of collecting. And I think people try to sound like they're intellectual and knowledgeable by talking about the mono stereo thing, but I've always found it to be a very boring and uninspired dialogue. Who cares? I mean, some of the electronically rechanneled records do have some inferior sound quality at times. The old monos do sound good because of their vintage and they were early pressings and they all just had good solid plates to press from. But early stereos are going to sound great always as well. And oftentimes you'll save money just by getting the stereo. With Lockjaw, you're not going to spend a lot for either. I mean, it's hard. You'll be hard pressed to spend $100 on a Lockjaw Davis record, and there's a lot of them. But his Prestige era stuff's just fantastic. Paul Whedon with Don Patterson on the organ, who's a fantastic Jimmy Smith disciple. Billy James on the drums and George DeVivier on the bass. DeVivier is one of those guys who's a career sideman, just is on a lot of sessions. It's a beautiful record. I mean, if you're starting jazz, this is a great place to start. It's easy, it's accessible, it's melodic, it's bluesy, it's grooving, it's rhythmic. It's all the things that you want. And I like every song on this record. It's really a great record. Then Jack Sheldon, who this initially was a 10-inch on the Jazz West label, which was an affiliate of Aladdin. And Jazz West is a small imprint that only does 8, 9, 10 titles, 2 of which were 10-inch Jack Sheldon records, which got recoupled onto an LP. But the Japanese issued the 10-inch covers on LP as well. So this J2 should be a 10-inch, but it's a 12-inch. And this got Jane Fielding on it. Is that her name? I can't remember. Excuse me, Jane Fielding. Was Zoot Sims. Jack Sheldon's a great, fiery player with a lot of joy. And he plays with a lot of fury, a lot of bravado. And Zoot Sims is right there with him. It's just a great session. It doesn't run long because it was a 10-inch initially. I'm trying to remember who else is on this. It might be Shelly Manno. Lawrence Marbles on the drums. With the great piano player Walter Norris, who doesn't do a lot of record recording as a leader. He was a bar piano player for years. And his one record as a leader at Riverside, really outstanding. Bob Whitlock's on the bass with Zoot and Jack on the tenor and trumpet. And Lawrence Marbles, of course, a great West Coast drummer that's on a lot of great West Coast sessions. Jazz West, every title on that label is worthwhile seeking out. You'll have a hard time finding any of them as original pressings. You'll just have to kind of buy them from Japan when you see them. This is a great Count Basie record on the Clef label. Basie at this point was kind of transitioning between small group stuff and some of the bigger band stuff. The big band stuff is tougher to keep on the road and to pay all the members. But this is a pretty big ensemble on this one. And it's a who's who. It's a who's who of 50s and 60s, even 40s players. And we'll just start off with the great Count Basie, Marshall Royal on the alto, the great Ernie Wilkins, who becomes one of the leading arrangers. This Fly Won't Leave Me Alone. Ernie Wilkins already did a lot of great arranging. Some of those Savoy records he arranges, fantastic stuff. And he's also a great alto player. Frank Foster's on the tenor, who, talk about Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster protege. Frank West is on the tenor who also can play multi-instruments. He's a multi-instrumentalist. I love Frank West's work. Charlie Folks on the baritone. Not a lot of work as a leader, but I love anything with Charlie Folks on it. Joe Newman on the trumpet, who has a large body of work as a recorder, a leader of his own. Wendell Culley on the trumpet. Thad Jones on the trumpet, who has 3 great blue notes and works with Mel Lewis for a long time. Thad Jones, one of the 3 Jones brothers out of Detroit, along with Elvin and Hank. Ronald Jones on the trumpet, who I can't tell you much about. Henry Coker on the trombone, with Ben Powell on the trombone and Bill Hughes on the trombone. All 3 of those players are fantastic, Coker especially. The great Freddie Green's on the guitar, one of the greatest rhythm lay down the pocket players you'll ever listen to. Eddie Jones on the bass and Gus Johnson's on the drums. And so you're talking about a lot of jazz royalty. And people are like, oh, Basie's too old for me. These guys are the foundation that Blue Note and Prestige and Riverside and Savoy and Bethlehem and all those labels stand on. And those labels were signing these guys to make records for them. And if I had to list here the guys that recorded as leaders for Blue Note, for Prestige, for Riverside, for Impulse, Thad Jones, Freddie Green, Joe Newman, Frank West, Frank Foster, Ernie Wilkins, Marshall. The talent is unquestionable. This record does have some big band arrangements with some incredible playing and soloing and blues riffing. These guys are throwdown artists. And the arrangements always stay minimal, and they don't dominate the composition. They don't dominate the song. They're just small little riffs that the band can go back to, almost like James Brown, who kind of takes that same principle of minimalism and runs with it and creates rhythm and blues of the modern era, which is the template for all of hip-hop and all of black music going forward. The minimalism of Basie, play a pattern. Let's riff that pattern. Let's blow that pattern up. Let's play it hard. Let's swing the shit out of it. And then let's riff on top of that with our soloers. And, I mean, Basie is a huge architect. And the foundation of his bands is the foundation of the modern small group jazz era. And some of Basie's small group recordings himself are just outstanding. Outstanding. And there's no such thing as a Basie session that doesn't have some blues and black church and integrity. And there's not a lot of mail 'em in sessions. I mean, there's always a lot of fun, barbecue, church, potato salad. I mean, these guys are brethren. I mean, it's a bit like black church. When they get together, things are going to go down. And it's such an important thing that you can't take church lightly. And you can't take Basie lightly. Basie's not frivolous. Basie's not throwaway. Basie's not to be discarded. Basie is one of the founding bricks that this entire castle stands on. And you might be up at that parapet up there with Ornette Coleman and trying to listen to some of that free jazz and thinking that, oh yeah, I know about jazz. It's up on that parapet. And you can take one little arrow, one little cannonball, and that parapet comes up, but the castle remains. That's not the castle. That's a small sliver of a building. Basie is that foundation. And if you get that, the castle collapses. So Basie needs to be spoken of with far more reverence than the modern day collector who dismisses his work. Well, I'm not really. I mean, if you ain't into Basie, you ain't into jazz, brother. Let's just be real about it. If you think you know so much that you think you don't need to know Basie, you basically don't know. You don't know. Basie throws down. His foundation, his gentlemanly crew, his assemblage of missionaries of this music. It's as great as the Art Blakey School of Musicians is. It pales in comparison to what the Count Basie School of Musicians and that branch of just infinite musicians is. Going back to the Rhythm Blue Devils with Walter Page and Orrin Hotlips Page. I mean, going back, it's Basie's group. These guys were, can't say it enough, man. And it's something, the more you dig into it, and the more you hear Basie's works, the more you're like, man, it's, people borrow from Basie. Basie doesn't borrow from anybody. Basie's just saying, let's keep it simple, guys. Let's keep it simple. And I'm guaranteeing anybody on this channel, anybody on the internet, if you could go back to 1948 or 38 or whenever, 1956, if you had a chance to see Basie's band, you'd have left that shit smiling and having had a great time. And if you'd have left some of that free jazz concerts, half the crowd would have walked out in the middle of it. And you might think this is the greatest thing, but Basie, that's the deal. And I need to say that because I hear people dismiss Basie. I see people gloss over his records, don't buy them. I see them sit in online shops for next to nothing at times. And boy, Basie's body of work that he records for Norman Granz, it'll stand up to any body of work, and you'll be able to come back to it and back to it and back to it and listen to it and listen to it. It's worthy of reverence. Last on the list, Paul Chambers Quintet. Late 1500 sequence, probably 1957, early 58. Great band here. You have the Chicago native Cliff Jordan on the tenor, along with Detroit native Tommy Flanagan on the piano. Elvin Jones of the Jones Brothers of Detroit as well. Donald Byrd of Detroit fame. And Paul Chambers, who I think he was Pittsburgh born, but lived and raised in Detroit for years as well. So you got kind of that Midwestern feel in this session. It's hard bop, some compositional, some post bop, but cool cover. Reed Miles, I'm sure. Or maybe not. It says Hannon. I'm guessing that's not a Reed Miles cover. That's interesting. I don't think he would have borrowed. The cover design by Tom Hannon. Interesting. Never noticed that before. Fantastic cover all the same. Again, a Japanese imprint. One of those records that would go for $1,000 in America for an original pressing. And you can get the Japanese one for $30-40. That's how you're going to need to find that. And the law would sound good. So that was yesterday's 6-pack. Some great stuff. Appreciate you all. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Again, we're trying to be as in-depth with some of this stuff and how these records feel and what they're about and where they fit in the canon. And I hope more people learn to appreciate that. Because it does feel discouraging making an episode about tone pool and all of a sudden everybody cares. And I get it on some level. It's easier to watch something about something you know about. Oh yeah, I have these records, I'll watch this episode about it. But sometimes we have to learn and go beyond those comfort levels and those boundaries and escape that normality and find some of the huge joy that exists beyond those programs. And a lot of these records you can find for $10. You know, people talk about, I don't want to pay big monies for originals. I don't want to have to pay for it. You don't have to pay $400 for Lockjaw Davis. You can find originals of that for $25 that'll play wonderfully. I mean, the Chambers, again, from Japan, the Bird from Japan, the Jack Sheldon probably have to come from Japan. You can find the Rene Tomas records sometimes, but old pressings that are pretty tough to come by as well. I don't think it's sold very well. Great stuff all in all. And we're going to pick a new 6-pack out for today, and we'll talk to you about that. It's coming up soon. And I have a fun episode also coming, talking about graphic design and jazz, looking through the Verve lens. We're going to examine the ripples that happen from David Still Martin, from Burt Goldblatt, and how it all spirals out and how fast things start changing. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.